Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Looks like we have some people coming in. We still have some seats being taken, as it were. Thank you for joining us today. Balancing act, ICAM initiatives, operational efficiency, and FedRAMP. How do we balance these things? How do we balance these and basically achieve multiple goals, multiple initiatives, multiple deadlines through sort of an organized effort? And before we jump into the talk and I introduce my fellow presenter, Bassam Al-Khalidi, hang on one second. Let's sort of set the stage a little bit. And I can set this stage while people are still coming in, just to give a sense of what this challenge is like. All of us who are technologists or work in technology or work in cybersecurity tend to have the same challenge. We have too many rocks. We have too many things that we have to pick up and that we have to manage on a constant basis. And it's not so much the quantity of rocks, although there's a ton of them. There's a different perspective depending on who you are, right? So you might be a CISO and you might have to manage all of these rocks. Like if all of these rocks represent all of your cybersecurity efforts and initiatives, as well as your regulatory and your policy-based programs, that's a lot to pick up. But you might also be, hey, the head of identity and access management, the VP of identity in an organization. You've got to know which rocks are yours, basically, which are the most critical and most important ones. And if you're in the federal government, especially, and you're an information architect or a systems architect or an identity architect, there's a lot of things that you have to, like rocks within your purview that are your responsibility that you have to manage. We're not going to talk so much about the individual rocks. We're going to talk in this session about how do you pick 3 of them that are all super important and super critical. How do you have them balance each other out? How do you use them together to help you balance and gain traction on some of these initiatives? That's really what the gist of this conversation is all about today. Again, the name of this presentation, thank you very much for joining us. For those that are dialing in later through an on-demand, thank you for picking our URL and clicking on us. We are from Axiad. My name is Michael. The session is called Balancing Act, and it's about how do you balance ICAM initiatives, operational efficiency, and FedRAMP, especially if you are in the federal government space, especially if you are a CISO in the federal space or an identity architect or a VP of identity in the federal government. Joining me today is Bassam Al-Khalidi, who is not only our co-founder at Axiad, he's also our Chief Innovation Officer. Bassam, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Glad to hear it. Thank you very much for joining me. Bassam's got a pretty busy schedule, so I was lucky to carve out enough of it, I think, to do a pretty compelling talk today and get some insight from him. My name is Michael Thelander. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Axiad, so I do an awful lot of market education and engagement, and I also work on the product strategy side. So with that, we're going to kick into it. Again, the context of this talk is really working in the federal space. So Bassam, I'm going to turn to you. Between us, I don't want to denigrate our roles too much, but we have been in cybersecurity between us for an awful long time, really long time. But you have been working with the federal government for a big part of that. Tell me a little bit about your original experience with sort of V1 of Axiad and even pre-Axiad and working in the federal space.
Yeah, and prior to starting Axiad, I had the opportunity to work with the federal governments on their HSPD 12 kind of directive. So Homeland Directive number 12, especially for federal governments, for how federal agencies and employees, how do they securely authenticate to resources? And that was the birth of the PIV program. Back I think in 2004, and we started
2004 or 5, around that range.
Around that range, yeah, around 2004, 2005, and around 2006, we really start to see major agencies deployment. But one of the biggest ones that I had the opportunity to really spend a lot of time on was the GSA managed service, the GSA MSO. Which over a million users kind of authenticate, get their PIV cards from and authenticate. And we learned a lot from that program and how that program is adopted and used and the level of security that it brought to the federal government.
Good. That's Bassam's unique perspective. And I'm going to lean heavily on Bassam because he is still to this day kind of our point person for a lot of our federal initiatives. And as we get to FedRAMP later in this presentation, Bassam, I think, can give us some insight on what we're doing there. I see that the seats, again, are starting to fill up on this session. It's digital, so we're not going to run out of seats. But thanks for joining us. For those that are just coming in, we've got poll questions that are going to come up soon. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and trigger the first poll right now before we kick into this, because I'm very interested in what your perspective is. Okay, so like, how do you come at this? Do you come at it as sort of the ICAM, Identity Credential Access Management practitioner, the one who's responsible for plugging the bits together and making them work, or more of the strategist, or maybe you're an auditor, maybe you're either a federal adjacent auditor or working on a specific audit team? So I'm very interested in your perspective on this, and we will come back to this in a little bit. On what we're going to cover today is we're going to focus around a couple of things that are happening. And I like to refer to like recent news and recent articles. I like this one from Breaking Defense, came out, I think, in February. And it doesn't say anything that we're not already all familiar with. We know that getting to a state of zero trust, or getting to a place even where zero trust is fully understood within the federal government, can be difficult. But let alone, what are the key challenges? What are the things that are in the way? And one of the things that was called out was ICAM, was dealing with credentials in that space, was one of the things that was uniquely called out as being difficult to manage. Federal News Network had an article in January, and this is pretty key. This is actually very telling, if you will, looking at the return of IT efficiency and effectiveness, right? So how are we going to basically do more with less? How are we going to do more with less? Our new department, Office of Government Efficiency, regardless of all of the news, positive and negative, that we're making today, has some pretty aggressive goals. I think originally it was $2 trillion in spending cuts. And although that was dialed back to $1 trillion, you have to look at a number like that and say, where is that coming from, and how do we work with that, and how do we make sense out of that, given the task that we have to do? And then the third sort of perspective layer that's on that is through GSA and FedRAMP and everything that's happening in that space. So obviously some news that just came out this last week. We had a goal already going into this year of doing 10 times as many authorizations as FedRAMP has done sort of on an annualized basis in the past. Well, now it's even higher. Now it's 20 times. So Bassam is somebody that, you've spent a lot of time working with FedRAMP. Did this surprise you? This change, this stated goal, like literally a couple of weeks ago, to say we're going to get to 20x. Did it surprise you, or do you think, do you immediately go to like, well, how are we going to do that?
I think a couple of things. I think one, as you mentioned, with regards to ICAM, I think that's a very important item. Is we need, not just agencies, but kind of even within the enterprise, to really kind of adopt or look at adopting ICAM and going beyond just identity and access management to identity and credential access management. That credential is really the cornerstone of zero trust, and I'm sure we'll talk later about it as we go through. So, and as we look at how agencies are looking towards going towards a more efficiencies, how do we do more with less? Obviously, adopting cloud native solutions helps go towards that process. Then if we look at, how does the federal government, how are they going to adapt these new products and these new solutions? Of course, from a security perspective, I'm a big fan of having the FedRAMP program, because it sets the bar of what is needed from a security perspective, from audits, from controls. What does that cloud platform need to adhere to be able to provide the services that it has to the federal government? From the fact that I'm not surprised at all that the goal is to increase, kind of from 10x to 20x. I think that's amazing. It gives an opportunity to provide more turnkey solutions to the federal government, so that they can kind of leverage those solutions to help them with accelerating to time to value, some of the efficiencies, getting rid of some of the legacy programs that they have on-prem that is very costly, because they're still sitting on legacy platforms, and to maintain them is expensive. But the road to FedRAMP, as you know, Michael, is quite challenging and not a simple task to get there. And honestly, I think again that's a great thing to have, because you want the bar to be set high. But we're definitely looking forward to seeing more organizations going down the FedRAMP route to be able to provide these solutions more turnkey and meeting the right level of security, not adding more threats by going to the cloud, because at least FedRAMP eliminates kind of the basic level from a security perspective. Everyone should be at least at this level of security, if not higher.
Sort of a baseline that's established for everybody. And
to watch the full video, click the link below to our Bright Talk channel. For more Axiad content, click subscribe.